Okay, so I'm doing my introductions a little differently. I'm basically going to let the guests introduce themselves, but first thing that I say is welcome to another episode of Creative Insanity. Welcome to Creative Insanity. I've known you for some time now, but I would like you, first of all, just to introduce yourself to my listeners. Who are you? Why are you here?
Yeah, of course. We're rolling. I love it. I appreciate you having me on, Spencer. I've known you now for pretty much since the brink of when COVID began, roughly, or even shortly right beforehand, in and around that time. And, if you had asked me who I was then, I would be honest, I would have a little bit of a different answer. And who I choose to identify myself now is I'm somebody who is wanting to inspire others to maximize their potential and expand their comfort zone. And every decision I choose to make is based on those two things. And that's what we value at Bravé MMA and Fitness. So naturally, I know who we are lines up with what we do. And I'm very happy to say, as you know, man, you've been listening since day one on the podcast. I'm finally able to feel like I'm in my field where I have so much passion for it. I love what I do to the point where I don't want to stop, quote unquote, working because I love it that much. And I co-founded Bravé MMA and Fitness alongside my brother, where we provide people the fundamentals of how to move and not be scared to move in a way that meets them where they're at, as well as learning the fundamentals of martial arts, I find is so important for others. So, I share this when you ask me who I am, because those are all the things that when you think about my time on earth to this day, since I was 9, I've spent majority of my life training martial arts and sweating every day and, just wanting to make that day count. And I find martial arts, whether you choose to compete in it or not, it gives you so much confidence. It improves your mental health. It makes you like really believe in yourself on and off the mats. And that's who I am. Is I want to do that for other people. I'm still in the pursuit of that for myself. I'm a jiujitsu athlete. I'm a podcaster. I love getting to know people. I love to show people what they're truly capable of doing. And I'm just someone where I realize that if I've been put on this earth, then there's something, and this is everyone that is listening to this, because I feel like everyone's put on this earth for a reason. You are not a wasted life. You're someone who deserves to, no matter how long it takes, navigate through your life to see what it is that, you not only feel like is your innate ability, but you also find so much joy in doing it that you're not looking at the clock. And that's me, man, is just being able to put that mission out there. And I appreciate you having me on your show, because it allows me to, even if it's 5 people that have never heard of who I am and what I do, they can hopefully get something out of this to allow themselves to just make that step. Doesn't have to be everything. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow, but take that first step in doing something you always wanted to do and moving it up the bucket list,
Yeah. Well, 100%. And I think that fundamentally, like you said, it's about connection. It's about people connecting. And so I want to know a little bit more about your backstory. I want to preface it, first of all, by a little bit of how I got to know you, because you mentioned the podcast, and that's Second Floor Podcast, right? Which, by the way, took me a while to realize that, leveling up, that means leveling up. And, but it was good. So you and Omid started that, and you guys another gentleman was in there, but you got this podcast going, and as very much focused on business and entrepreneurship and exactly that, leveling up. And at that time, I wanted to start this podcast, Creative Insanity. And I've been listening to you guys, and I connected with you, and you kind of became a mentor for me, technically in the realm of podcasts, but we talked about artistry. We talked about, what my vision is as servant, what I'm trying to do. And I think it kind of broadened into friendship. But it was after we hadn't been working together for some time, we both got real busy. That's when I discovered, you do like jujitsu and stuff. You got this big epic backstory with that. And I was getting into jujitsu as well. And so it was something we had never talked about, but both of us had pursued separately. And I think there's an interesting story I'd love for you to tell about your backstory with martial arts. Is you said you started as a kid, but you got injured at some point as well, quite severely. Tell me about the journey to that point and then what that point did to you.
Yeah, definitely, man. I find it unique too, before I get into it, how there's so many different angles to people. And even when you started getting into jujitsu, and then you perhaps maybe saw a post on my feed and we connected on another level in jujitsu, recognize that I do it too. It's just being able to recognize that, yeah, you're more than just one thing you do. There's so many different things that make up somebody based off their interests, right? But yeah, wow, how I got into it is what you're asking.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, man, for me, I was a crazy outgoing kid, to the point where my parents didn't know how to handle my energy. Like um, I always say this joke, and I've said this on other podcasts, is my parents would call India and they'd be like talking to their siblings, being like, "Can you just please take care of him now?" Like they like really don't know what to do with him. Like high ADHD, like high level of I always want to be doing something. I was a bratty kid. I gave my parents a hard time, and by no means was it something they deserved. I constantly just needed to be stimulated.
Mm-hmm.
And, along the way, my dad came across a newspaper ad, and it was talking about a Taekwondo gym that's opening up nearby inside of a little community league. For those who are outside of Edmonton, a community league is like a little tiny hub of bringing the community members together inside of a small little hall. And my sensei at the time thought it'd be appropriate to run and open his gym in there, which is a great start. And I was one of 3 students that started. So at 9 years old, my dad reads this paper. He sees that it says, discipline your kids. Or discipline got him, right? And from there, man, I saw a 180-degree shift. Like martial arts, I don't want to even say my parents took that risk, because it's not. I hope now, I mean, when you look at almost 20 years later from that time, we have a lot more, you could say, understanding that martial arts is needed for kids, needed for adults, especially at least the foundation, because it definitely changes the way you show up for yourself and others. And it did for me, man, at such a young age. Like, let's look at it. You understand this as a father. When your kids at that time, you're like a sponge. And when you have someone who needs to move, needs activity, martial arts is great for that, because you're constantly each minute needing to be doing something. Or you know what, to be honest, any sports in general. But what martial arts does is it prevents you from being bullied. It actually allows you to know if at any point you need to protect yourself, you know what you need to do. And then just watch the overall nature of how someone shows up. So through that process, man, I never stopped. I went from Taekwondo, I transitioned to MMA, and I felt like 9 years later, I was ready to step into the octagon. And at 18 years old, I had my first and only MMA fight. And unfortunately, to my, like surprise, and to what I realized happened, I shattered my jaw on both sides of my face. So this was in the first minute of the fight. I kept fighting through it when I got dropped. And right when that happened, I fought through the whole round, knowing that something bad really happened. Like my face felt broken into 3 pieces, and I could feel, I remember taking my tongue and trying to put it alongside my face, and I couldn't feel anything. Like I couldn't feel my teeth.
It's a gruesome video. Having been exposed to it later on, like it actually made me feel sick to my stomach seeing that.
Yeah, no, totally. Like, and I apologize for the listeners right now that feel like they might need to skip over this part, but I mean, even though that happened, it made me approach life even at that point very differently. It was like that anything can happen to you feeling. It was that near death experience. It was what people call like overcoming adversity. And that was, to this day, the hardest thing I've ever had to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it, when it happened, even though I felt like I'd go fight again, I did another kickboxing fight, but that was it. Even though I fantasized the idea of going back and fighting and doing what my brother's doing, where he's a full-time professional MMA fighter. As I got older and I was, making my way through university and going through the steps of going out there and knowing what it's like working for somebody, and now flash forward, having my own gym, it's as though it was destined to happen in a really fucked up way. It was like, you know what? I came out of that realizing that there's a role I have in my dojo and in my academy, and it's being able to build the strongest jiu-jitsu team. That's what I pivoted to. My brother is exceptionally, I'll admit it, way more obsessed in MMA than I am. I felt like I loved the sport, but when I see how much he did and I saw what he was willing to do, watching tape, writing notes, obsessing about it, it really made me be real with recognizing that my reasons of going into this aren't as pure as his. This is my brother's only option. For me, my personality, my other interests, I don't need to risk getting my face broken again and perhaps not looking the same, or even being able to taste food, or even being able to live. Why risk that? And that was a lot of growth in my 20s through that quote unquote tragic experience. Is I just accepted right around, to be honest, when COVID began. I'm like, I'm not going to go back and fight. But what I am going to do is I'm going to keep learning jiu-jitsu, and I'm going to do my best to become the best in the world at it. It's still a process. I've competed in the world championship games 2 times over. I've changed significantly how I show up to training. But jiu-jitsu replaced my love and my interest in recognizing that I love competing. I love challenging myself. Heck, I love fighting. I enjoy that part, but I also enjoy the journey and how I'm disciplined and show up to my days leading up to the tournament. And I'm sure, as you can probably speak on this later, there's a lot of mental fortitude and physical push you put yourself through in a camp in any martial art, so not to discredit jiu-jitsu at all. It's just, I knew I could go into this and become the best at something that replaces so much of what MMA gave me without the risk of hurting my face. And I'm really glad, man. It worked out beautifully.
Have you ever wanted to grow your own garden, but didn't feel like you had the space? With food costs rising and concerns over fertilizers and unnecessary chemicals being added to our food every day, maybe you should consider purchasing a hydroponic garden system for your home. Grow clean and fresh produce all year round with the Eden Tower from Hope Innovations. When it comes to growing your own food, invest in the best system out there and discover the joy of regularly having freshly harvested salads, homegrown herbs, tomatoes, peppers, and more with your very own hydroponic system. Engineered to be elegant and practical, the Eden Tower stands above the competition with its patented cup system that allows you to drop a seed and go. You don't need a green thumb to grow some of the most delicious and nutritious food you've ever had. I have an Eden Tower in my home, and we've had it for many months now. My children love it, my wife loves it, and having it supply our table with fresh produce has become a regular and welcome staple to our diet. For my viewers and listeners, get an exclusive $200 discount when you make a purchase at hopeinnovation.ca for your own Eden Tower. Go to hopeinnovation.ca and use coupon code SERVANT to receive $200 off your order. Once again, that's hopeinnovation.ca. Use coupon code SERVANT, spelled SRVENT, to get $200 off your purchase of an Eden Tower. Support the show by supporting them and your own fridge with fresh vegetables and fruits in the process. And now, back to the show.
Now in our academy, my brother runs the striking program. I run the jiu-jitsu program. I'm working with my brother. I dreamed of this thinking this would happen in our 40s. Here we are in our 20s, early 30s making this happen. This was something I thought that would be a quote unquote retirement plan, you know? But here I am feeling like I'm young, I'm hungry, I'm still competing. I used to think it's not possible. The brown belt in me thought the black belt was the ticket to run a gym. Here I am, still, I can bet you years away from getting that. And I now no longer care about feeling what people say or what I say about myself, and not being ready to at least be there for our students and show them through our lessons and through what we've gone through that, everyone starts as a white belt. and being able to teach them the way I'm glad I got taught, and also the way I didn't like getting taught, and bringing all that in the mix to show them a, a unique style of learning, So yeah, man, it was a journey. I mean, not to get into too much detail of it, but like when you're hospitalized for a week and when you can't eat food for 6 months and when you lose 25 pounds um, without like your own doing, and you go into a fight overconfident, you wake up the next day a vegetable, like you have time to think, you have time to really process all that. And I did, man, and I got through it. And I'm really glad, man. Like it's funny how with time, yeah, you don't forget, but I think time does heal because I used to let that moment really define me. It used to always be one of the first things I wanted to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be a part of my who am I? I'm Kenny. I broke my jaw in MMA. Like it's like now I'm like, hey, it happened. Now since then, who have I decided to identify myself as? And I say that very, very seriously because you are not defined by your shortcomings and you're not defined by the things that were completely out of your control. And I mean this on a very like high level of people who have been abused, who've gone through things that they're traumatized for life by, but then they become so hard on themselves because they think how they could have prevented it. So for me, it's really important that I make sure I'm there for our students who also look at martial arts as an avenue of therapy. And it's from the moment they step into our doors, from how I approach them to how I teach to how I make sure they feel supported. That matters so much to me. Like that is so important. And I welcome everyone and anyone who's been physically abused, sexually abused, any type of abuse, verbally even, try martial arts. And I know it's probably the like scariest thing for people who are in that to consider it, but I know people who were so scared to try and they did, and just to see how it's changed them. So it's important, man.
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing I'd say about that is that anybody who's scared of anything, I think it's often wise to examine your fear, and very often it's good to lean into it. Like if you're afraid of physical confrontation, you're not going to get better at handling it by avoiding it. It has to be through exposure. If you've been through trauma of any sort, or if you haven't and you're just afraid of trauma, I think that martial arts is a very tactile way to become a hardier person. Because in your case, you had one of the extreme scenarios, the kinds of things that doesn't happen to everybody. Some people can train in martial arts their whole life. Some people can, try this sport, that sport, athletically jump around in different areas and be relatively injury free. But you trained hardcore, you got the confidence, you're ready to fight, you're ready to beat someone, you're ready to kill somebody. You're jumping in there, and to have it, your whole world all of a sudden flip around in a moment, that is trauma, right? And that's a wall, that's a barrier. And I think it's interesting to me to see, what do people do when they hit the wall? Like what do they do when they encounter these barriers? Because that's what defines your character. Very often, if you're not tested, you don't really know what you're capable of. And in my own minor way, as someone who's been getting into competitions, I've been training jiu-jitsu about a year and a half. I've had a number of times sitting on the edge of the bathtub, just like in pain, like sore as hell, leaning over and just thinking to myself, like, man, I just got my ass kicked all night. I feel like mildly humiliated or something. I feel like really bad about myself. I feel weak. I feel cowardly. And it's like I've have to have these moments where it's like, you know what, despite all that, I'm going to just keep showing up. I'm just going to keep pushing through it. And I've seen in this short time immense progress. And I think for you, it's short compared to the span of your life, hopefully, but longer than I've been doing it, we've seen some immense things happen. You've started a gym. You're teaching kids now and how to defend themselves and to have fun with this sort of sport. It's definitely something that I wanted to focus on a bit, was that that idea of hitting the wall and getting to a point where you have to examine what matters most in your life.
Yeah, we hit that wall and we think it's a really good example because then people can visualize it. Hit the wall, and then a lot of times when we hit it so hard, we we don't get up again. You know, we hit it so hard that we let that bruise it leaves on us, and that scar it leaves on us. We let that be the first step we take in front of the world when we face it again. You know, we let everyone become aware of that. And instead, what you can do is recognize that, yeah, you know what? Those bruises and scars, some of them aren't going to leave. They're not going to go anywhere. They're going to stay. But you get up and you do it again. And you recognize that through time, and this is from my experience, I understand there's people who've gone through far worse shit. So I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not trying to say like everyone does this with no matter what trauma, right? Like that's not what I'm trying to get at. But I'm trying to get at like what got me through mine and what prevented me from like honestly like shooting myself and wanting to like go into a pit of depression, which I never thought that, I'll be honest. But I know I could have. I know I could have, with like how traumatic that experience was for me. The shift immediately was telling myself and knowing that I'm gonna get better. Like I'm not gonna be in this hospital for the next coming year. I am gonna eat again. I am gonna be able to have my mouth open from the wires that are keeping it shut to talk again. But in the meantime, let's pivot. How can I communicate with people now? Text and journal, right? What can I eat? Hey, I have Ensure shakes. At least it's better than not eating at all, right? It's like, oh, I'm in the hospital and it sucked, man. I'll tell you right now, it's embarrassing to say it, but I remember I was calling the nurse. And I remember this was the lowest point. I was calling the nurse while I was on the bed so they can assist me in going to the bathroom. And I couldn't move. I needed their assistance. This was like 1 or 2 days post-op. And I'm like on, I forgot what the drug's called, but it's that drug that like melatonin? No, that
No,
helps you
that's
sleep.
this,
No,
Dilaudid
um,
maybe.
it's one of those really
Yeah,
high level things, right? So
some kind of
I'm
horse
on that.
tranquilizer.
Yeah. And I'm like running in and out of sleep. And I hit the button to call the nurse because I really need to go to the bathroom. No one comes. And I peed myself. And at that point, feeling so helpless, I was like, what can get worse than this? Like, this is rock bottom right now for me. And tomorrow, I'll get 1% better. My own experience with that was I didn't want to look at myself. I didn't want to look. And I remember when I did, my face felt like it was as big as Elephant Man, right? But aside from that, what I'm trying to get at with the walls is, man, like you're not going to tear that wall down all at once. I love how Will Smith's dad said this, like one brick at a time, whether it's something you're trying to build or something you're now trying to get rid of. That's the part I added. Is you could take off that wall one brick at a time. And it will then allow you to recognize that, yeah, when those insecurities or when those little sense of doubt kicks in again, you face it. But then once again, how you talk to yourself and say, this doesn't define me. This isn't who I am anymore. It was a part of me, but now look and see. Look and see what I've gotten past. Right. So even through the act of personal training and teaching people incremental progression, like I have clients that burn themselves out because they want to go 0 to 100. They don't go 0 to 5. They don't go 5 to 10. So when breaking down that wall, man, you gotta be real with yourself, and you gotta respect that through time, it will get better. And let's face it, like you can't do it alone. You gotta have support. Like your network of people that are there for you too. Like, man, I wouldn't have been able to go through what I did alone. That would have been fucked. That would have been like, I don't know what would have happened if I had to go through that myself. But I'm really blessed and glad I have a family and friends of people that really helped me during that time. And I really want people to recognize, this is kind of unrelated, I'm babbling, but you're gonna like this. This guy on TikTok, it was so brilliant the way he said it. He's like, you know what? He's like, time isn't the greatest currency. He's like, it's not. Because he's like, I'm gonna ask everyone a question. Who here wants $1 million? Everyone, puts their hands up. You get $1 million right now, would you get it? Okay, if you had to choose between your mother being alive or the $1 million, what would you do? And then he jokes. He's like, maybe some people would do it. But he's like, yeah. He's like, no, you wouldn't take the $1 million. That's someone you love. So he's like, okay, family, social relationships, a whole lot higher than the $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Then he made another point. Like, okay, would you rather have $1 million or if you had the $1 million, you'd die tomorrow? Or you would be able to live. You have to live for the next foreseeable few years. But you have the $1 million, you die tomorrow. Everyone's like, yeah, no, you'd rather live, right? He's like, okay. So now family and like social relationships and the ability to be there for, I lost my train of thought.
The ability to be present, the ability to exist, something to do with time, perhaps.
Yeah. Thank you. Your health, right? Yeah. So it's like relationships and your health. You'd rather live longer. What are you going to do with $1 million? So the whole point of this was there's your social relationships and there's your health that a lot of people tend to neglect, and they wonder why they're suffering so much. And that's a big part of like why I do what I do, because I feel like, once again, to break those walls down, when people look after their health, they start to feel less depressed. They start to get rid of depression, right? Studies that are showing now that like you have 1.5, like it's actually like 150% more likely for you to decrease your depression when you actually work out and move your body.
Yeah. And there's a great deal of physiology to do with that. Like you're just increasing blood flow and oxygen to your brain. It's like, man, that stuff's just going to work better, right? Like it's not, it's like, if you think of it like a kind of machine, the gears aren't going to get so easily stuck. There's lubrication there. Just one way I think about it.
Oh, it's so true, man. Exactly. Like you know what this is like. If we sit even for 8 hours in a day, get up. The hips are tight, man. We're not meant to sit like this in a forward-leaning posture for this long period of time. And the way society is now designed with the work we do, whether we're working remotely or not, we're still going to be guilty of gluing ourselves to our computer with back-to-back Microsoft Team meetings. Not everyone, but for a large percent of the North American population, sitting, you know, and it's like I've seen so many clients that are in more pain because they sat all day than the ones that are doing something that's physically demanding.
Oh, totally. This allows me to pivot a little bit into more talk about jiu-jitsu. I wanted to ask, so my podcast, as you know, it's called Creative Insanity. And very often, I think the whole premise is like, I'm talking to people from different disciplines who are very creative. And I talk about where that connects with their level of sanity. Are they sane because of it, in spite of it? How do they work that out in their mind? And I think, bless you, to some people, they think of martial arts, even though it has arts in the name, they think of combat sports not as inherently creative. I think a lot of people are like, oh yeah, that's like skipping rope and like smacking people and stuff. So that's good, but that's not the same thing as, composing a masterpiece. And I will say, it's a different discipline, but it's become very evident to me in my practice of it, of how strong an art form it is, how much creativity is present, especially like in jiu-jitsu and MMA and that sort of thing. So I kind of wanted to know, do you see yourself as a very creative person? And talk a bit about creativity in the sport of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I mean, you have to let your creativity in jiu-jitsu, you can't let that get in the way of doing things doing things right. Because there's also, on the flip side, from being creative is being logical. And I know there's like different parts of our brain that are more tuned in, where I know I'm more creative. My creativity has gotten me in sometimes worse situations in jiu-jitsu, right? Especially when you're beginning, and you would appreciate this when you obviously white, blue, like obviously when you're beginning, there's more you don't know than what you know. So being creative, sometimes you feel like works to your advantage, and it can't. But I look at it where just the same, it could get you in just as much trouble, because you creatively think like, oh, what if I get my hip out this way? I go really fast. Oh, I just hurt my back. Oh, I twisted my knee the wrong way. Now we're sitting in the tub and we're like, oh my goodness, I'm in a lot of pain. Well, that happens. So for me, I find, yes, I'm more creative than I am logical. So I really like the idea of this question, because I need to now respect when my creativity um is used to my advantage. So the way my brain works, I'm trying to relate this to jujitsu, is I'll just tell you something unrelated and I could probably circle it back. I become more creative with what I need to do, even when it comes to, let's say, hosting a podcast or being a guest on a podcast,
Mhm.
when it's the last minute, when I'm under pressure, when it's that last like 10 seconds, right? To like show up for something. And it just works. Miraculously, my brain is just like, like it just clicks. So yes, be prepped. I'm not saying don't be prepared, but also like recognize what works for you. And the second part of your question, you were saying, are you creative? And what was the second part?
Basically, how you thought creativity related to jujitsu, and you're
It
you're
does. It
started
does.
you're starting to answer that already.
Yeah, here's the thing. As you respect the process of becoming more experienced, then great. I could be creative. I can work with you. And immediately now, when we spar and I start paying attention to where are your hips, how are you moving? Do I choose to pull guard or do I choose to go for a takedown? Okay, now it's beautiful, because as I become more experienced, that's where creativity is going to come in. It's going to help me make decisions. If I'm not creative and I'm not able to make these decisions quick on the fly, then he's gonna put me on my back. It's now his game. So I find the more experience we get in jujitsu, and that's why you trust the process in it, the more you're able um, to do,
Right.
right? And you gotta realize that, like, when I think that way, I will look at a situation and kind of like think, okay, I took him down to the ground. I'm in side control. What should be the first thing I could do at this point? Right? This is where being creative starts to help with that process,
Hmm.
right? But also, I can't neglect the logical part of my brain, because let's face it, do I want to lift my foot over his head, reverse over, and
Mm.
get an arm bar, make it really flashy? Well, yeah, but could I just put my knee on belly and get 2 points and
Right.
then there get mount, tire him out, and then proceed to the submission? Well, that's my logical brain coming in, making these decisions. And that's where you have to realize creativity can be a double-edged sword.
Hmm.
You can't rely on creativity in jiu-jitsu. And this is why you have to recognize that you're going, and you have to submit yourself. Like, you have to be so submissive to the sport. You can't go in there, and I've seen guys like this, and it just irks me in my head. Some guys go, hey man, like, I could learn really quickly. I could get the hang of this. You know, I like, they're just boasting themselves. I get the hang of this really quick. And they actually, through that mentality, whether they realize it or not, I'm a big believer in, they're not showing up as much. That used to be me. A
Mm.
lot of what I did relied on athleticism. But in jujitsu, your athleticism at a certain point, oh buddy, you're gonna feel it. You're gonna have a guy that's more logical and technical, spent more time drilling instead of just rolling, and you're creative, you're fun, you're spinning around, you're in scrambles, you're rolling on the mats, you walk out drenched, right? And you're like, whoo, like, you're like, that was a fun day, right?
Yeah.
But like, you sat there in someone's like triangle choke or someone's rear naked, and you're just trying to survive. And I tell a lot of white belts this. I say, I'd rather have you like tap 1,000 times and ask how to get out of it than 1,000 times try and survive. And that was my downfall in my progression in jiu-jitsu. I spent way too much time letting, like, stroking my ego, being like, that black belt couldn't tap me out.
Hmm.
Fuck, man, he had me like on my belly flat, choking me, and I'm just sitting there like, I'm losing. Like,
Yeah.
this is not a good situation to be in. So yeah, be creative, but also you have to recognize that you're about to embark in something brand new. And some adults, they can't face that. They go into jujitsu, they struggle, they get told, or they tell themselves that they're not good enough, or they get told like, hey, you're doing it wrong. Oh, you gotta do it better. You gotta do it better. They'll spend 5, 10 minutes if a good enough coach is gonna be patient enough to show the details. And let's face it, it's very rewarding, but a lot of people will then feel discouraged and they'll actually be so hard on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But no, man, like I love learning. I love feeling like I don't know anything. I want to go in there and that stimulates me. So I think that's why jujitsu, everyone should do it. Every human being should do it because it's going to bring down ego for those that think they're overconfident. And for those that are underconfident, it's going to eventually make them feel like they have purpose and they can protect themselves and they can go through steps. That's the best part. You know this. Setting up an armbar, we'll drill it 100 times. There's steps to that. It's not just, it looks like it happens all at once. When you break it down, I have to do this so meticulously. You know what I mean?
Yeah. To build on your thought, I think that what you're saying dovetails nicely with the sentiment that creativity is best served under discipline. So when I've experienced this, like when you have limitations, when you have pillars in your way, reality, for instance, that is going to be the thing that's the playground to showcase real creativity. Having no boundaries, just whimsical, a totally blank canvas, do whatever you want. That is, for most people, stymieing. That is something that stops people, that paralyzes, that inhibits people, because it's like, what are you going to make if you can do anything? What matters is when you have this particular problem, this 240 pound, 6'8" guy in front of you that you've got to deal with. Now, the creativity comes through discipline in that you understand the logic. You've drilled things, so you don't have to necessarily think each move through, but you can strategize, and you can see that if I attempt to stay up with him, if I don't let him take me down, then I'm going to funnel him into something where hopefully I'm on top. So it's like you're trying to create a strategy. And now if you wind up on top, then maybe you don't really want to stay in mount too long because this guy's so strong. You want to get to his back. Like whatever your strategy is, it all spiders out. And there's limitations because at the end of the day, you're going to open one door and you're going to get smashed. That guy's going to smash you this way. He's going to smash you if you go that way. But there's a path through it. And that takes ingenuity. That takes creativity, certainly. But you can't even see the option without the discipline, if you don't
I love that.
respect the sport. Yeah. That's kind of like, yeah.
Oh, that's so cool, man. And like, that's why, like, it's cool that we're talking about this, especially through, it's such a not hard, but it's such an important topic in your podcast that we need to address because it's creative insanity, right? But when you look at the root of where creativity comes from is it's coming from the act of creating something. So when you look at the definition, it's the use of the imagination, or this is really important to highlight, original ideas. Ideas that have actually worked in the past and have been able to be like used and proved to work, especially in the production of an artistic entity. And this is straight from Oxford Dictionary, right? So when you peel the layers of that, you recognize where it's like, this is the act of making something happen and being able to do it from, let's face it, there are moments in jiu-jitsu where these moves weren't made by the gods. There's not like a jiu-jitsu Bible, but sometimes it feels like it with like the really great, I don't want to say cult because it's not, but the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the community aspect, the Gracies, right? Like, yes, down the line and lineage, these have come from places. But also, let's face it, they've been down the years and years of when jiu-jitsu has been originated, they've been altered. They've been designed to be done in gi and no gi. They've been slightly more adapted based off of someone's creative mind to be like, wait a second, what if I move the arm this way? Oh, look at the submission there, right? And then that's where like these moves actually became adopted from existing moves.
Yeah.
Or from other elements of arts in combat. So it's cool, man.
Yeah, as a perfect example of this with De La Riva. So for those who don't understand jiu-jitsu as a sport, there's a lot of terms, there's a lot of names for different kinds of guards and different positions that you're in. Typical inside guard is just imagine somebody's in between your two legs or whatever. They're inside your guard. And that's a closed guard. And if you do weird other funky things, everything's got a name. Often they're named after people who came up with it. And De La Riva is an example of it. He was a very small guy, is my understanding. And people kept passing his guard by crossing his leg, or they do like a leg cut or something, a knee cut, I think they call it. So they'd take their knee and they'd run across the inside of his thigh. And he was so small that they just bullied him into it all the time. And he eventually, he was like, how can I stop this? And so he came up with a very creative way to grip a person's foot and to contort his leg around when they go for this cut, that he can actually prevent the cut from happening. And he can lock this person in this really weird position, and it becomes De La Riva, and then a lot of people train in it. And it's something that he would have had to understand the problem really well to come up with a solution of that nature. Are you enjoying this conversation? I really hope so. This podcast, like my music videos and films as Servant, is a labor of love. But the bottom line is that volunteer labor has its limitations, and all of this takes money. For my staff Nikki's hours as she edits the show, for my own hours as I chase down interesting guests and record with them, there's always a cost to producing high-value content, even if that cost is small. Support my artistry as Servant and the show Creative Insanity by buying me and my team a coffee, or sign up for a monthly membership to help me make music, films, and podcasts that are meaningful and worth experiencing. Simply go to buymeacoffee.com/servant. Once again, that is buymeacoffee.com/servant, spelled SRVENT, and see how you can support. Thank you to everyone for listening, supporting, and sharing these conversations with your friends. All of that's very helpful to the podcast. And thank you as well to everyone who supports my music and films as Servant. And now, back to the show.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. I'm really glad you mentioned this too, because it's such a great example, is the adaptation of, here's a guard, let's create a different version based off of me being creative enough to see that based off my body type and the struggles I'm going through, here's how I can solve a problem. Here's how I can fix it with a slight adjustment. And, Ricardo De La Riva, the gentleman that created this, he found this originally from the adaptation of judo, right? It was utilized in judo. This is what was documented from evolve/MMA.com, right? And in the early 1980s in Brazil, this gentleman actually began to develop this system. And the cool thing is he's a student at Carlson Gracie Academy too, which is like what I'm affiliated with.
Right,
so,
yeah.
That you saw that connection, man.
Yeah, no, I think that jiu-jitsu is, like you said, everybody should train jiu-jitsu. I think obviously, it's going to be hard for some people. Some people but I think fundamentally, if you are able-bodied in any sense, to any degree, jiu-jitsu is good for multiple reasons. And it's not just good because it's, for people who are trying to fight in tournaments and people who are super aggressive, but, there's a lot of people who have been through trauma, as you said, who train in jiu-jitsu, and they develop resilience because of it. They develop techniques to defend themselves. They create confidence, something that jiu-jitsu has a bit of a culture where you can fall into it in focus on the sporty element of it, right? And that's where it's like, you could be in this really weird guard where you got this guy, bent in 4 different angles, and you're like holding his foot or something, and you're like, now you can't do anything. And this is really cool. But in real life, the guy still has a free hand. He could smack you in the face. So when it comes to real life fighting situations, jiu-jitsu has massive application, but it's also good, I think, sometimes to do an MMA week or something where it's like you're allowed to slap persons. And it just reminds you that, oh, you know what? I need to get in and get tight and get around them. I got to get to their back real fast. Like you learn the mechanics of a fight and from self-defense. I feel like that was a bit of a rabbit trail, but what I'm trying to say is that ultimately there's multiple reasons why jiu-jitsu in particular is good to train at if you're able-bodied and you want to go try something. But any martial art, anything that gets your blood flowing is going to be good for you in in too many ways to list, you know, like, and I think that's why I wanted to have you on this podcast, is to show that as creative people, people who are hyper creative, like a lot of the people who listen to this show, very often we do get stuck in our heads, and our body is just this thing to move our head around. And really, we need to embrace the idea of sport, of athleticism, of getting your body moving, and how it can actually reinvigorate and help you apply your creativity in life.
Yeah, wow, that's so well said, man. Especially that last part is, if you want your brain to move the way you want it to, move your body, and watch when you release those endorphins, when you are just buckets of sweat pouring down you, breathing heavy, steam is coming off your body. You've been there post jiu-jitsu, you're looking up at the top of the roof of your academy, and you're just in this state of bliss. And you are, man. And that's how I feel anyway. And like, whether you had a good day or bad day, it's just, you showed up for yourself that day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's cool about jiu-jitsu, is you walk out of that day and you damn well know you learned something today. And you showed up for yourself. Two very important things that we just don't do enough of on a daily basis. And when you do so, when you bring in the concept of creativity, I shit you not, man, my best ideas have come from those moments where I am a day away from coming on a podcast. I am hours away from showing up to a meeting, and I'm done practice, and I'm sitting there laying down, or I'm in the shower after practice. I'm like, whoa, light bulb moment, right?
Yeah.
Like, I got to write this down. Like, I become more creative. And I'm no doctor, but I know there's scientific like proof of this concept of when you are able to actually put in work physically, man, like the results you get mentally are substantial. And I think that's the sad reality, is at this point, you don't say that to someone now and they go, oh, I didn't know that. Like, everyone fucking knows. Everybody knows this, right? Like, let's face it, it's 2023. We're in the like post-pandemic world. We all get it. The thing that gets in the way is laziness, is just someone that knows, no matter how much their friends and loved ones and whatever are encouraging them, or they know they got to do it and they just don't. That is where you got to face that lazy demon in the mirror, and you got to be like, yo, go fuck yourself. Like, I'm sorry, but it's like you are getting in the way of what I need to do. And the thing is it comes from something I'm glad, man, I learned at Good Life, is a trans-theoretical model of change. Is people feel like when they show up, they're now in this state of pre-contemplation. They know they got to do it, but they don't. They know they got to do it, but don't. And then they show up, but they might be demanding results too soon. They might also feel like they're going to embarrass themselves.
Yeah.
You just have to accept, just like you did when you went into grade 1, just like you did when you realized that you got to get some sort of like credentials, or you got to be some way to show up for something. It's going to take time. And if you can eat shit, where I feel like it'd be at least for the first 2 years in jiu-jitsu, and I know that sounds like a lot, but you and I both know, like, you're in the trenches some days. Just know that the reward is so sweet, man. Like, the community aspect, like everything. And it's sad, man, because so many people say that I know, I wish I did jiu-jitsu sooner. And I say, why? And the reason is not only to get better at it, but they're like, man, like, they're like, the way I go about life now, like how much more calm I am, how much more problems I create in my head are like less. Like, it's crazy. Like, I sound like a hoodoo voodoo jiu-jitsu guy, but it's the answer. Like, and if it's not that, then go train, go do something, go be a part of something and gamify it. Jiu-jitsu is great because it's gamified. You know when you win, you know when you lost, you know if you're in the trenches, or you know if you're on top. But like, where people start to get bored is they go to the gym, they're there for a month and a half, they're hardly tracking the results, and they fall off because it becomes boring.
Yes.
It just flat out just becomes very boring. But then with jiu-jitsu, it never does.
No.
Because you walk out of it, you're asking yourself questions in your head or out loud. But, I digress, man. It's just, you know how I feel about it. I love talking about it. And even if one person listens to this and they're like, you know what, damn it, I'm gonna try it. Please, I want you to tell me how it was and stick to it because it's huge. It changed my life. It literally, if I didn't do jujitsu, I would probably be like I wouldn't have a gym now. I would have no skills to show. I
Hmm.
might as well like go to my brother and be like, "Hey man, like I'll just teach the beginner striking because I know you're the better expert." Like no, like I'm bringing something to the table. He's bringing something to the table, right? And I just think I'm not telling people that they need to make a career out of jujitsu, but when people tell me that they legitimately are more have more clarity and they show up to their loved ones and themselves more, and they're better at their jobs by doing martial arts or jujitsu or even just having a habit of training, it's beautiful to me.
Hmm.
And that's needed. And then if you still don't want to do it, then I always say you got to talk to a therapist. Like, it's like, okay, if you can't, if I
Yeah,
can't like motivate you with my pitch, go see a therapist to
that's
see what's
funny. Yeah, it's hard when people ask about jujitsu. I had a very funny encounter just the other day. My wife works at the hospital, and I was meeting up with her at lunchtime. We were going to go for a walk, and I'm running just a little bit late. So right in front of the hospital, I'm jogging, just lightly, trying to catch up, get in there. And some guy is coming out, and he stops me, and he goes like, he's got a thick accent, and he's a really cool guy, and he's like, "Hey, how much do you run every day, every morning? How much do you run?" And I was like, I don't actually run at all. I said, I run if I'm late to places. I don't run today. Um, and he said, like, well, how are you fit? Like, how is it that you're so active? Like, so he's looking at me, and I guess I'm looking fit. And I say, like, oh, well, I do jujitsu. And he's like, what is that? And so I'm like, oh, buddy, like, now's the time. So I start telling him about jujitsu. And, it's hard in those scenarios because it does answer a lot of questions, and it becomes like you can just pitch it and build it up because you see 18 different ways that it's improved your life. So you're so excited about telling someone like, oh man, like you have no idea, right? Like you got to
I
walk
have
through that
five
door.
minutes.
Yeah, you got five at least. Where I've kind of learned in conversations about jujitsu where I've started to like cap myself and be like, okay, I've said enough about it. If you're interested, come check it out. Because yeah, you can talk yourself into and then out of it because then people are intimidated, like, whoa, like I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of change.
So that's the crazy thing, right? Because I agree. You look it up and you're gonna get the definition of the gentle art, which is so ironic and funny because it's like, like it can be gentle, but as
Yeah.
you and I both know, it can be intense if and when you want it to be. So
Oh
that's the
yeah.
cat. You just tell someone how hard you want to go and you go accordingly. But
Mhm.
then the other thing is I get it. Like for me, it's so normal. I've been doing this since a young age. I'm used to coming up and underhooking a stranger and coming that close.
Yeah.
But then people look up videos and they're like, whoa, like this is weird. Like, and I get it, like, oh, like let's talk about it. Spouses may potentially not wanting them to go. You're gonna be that close to a dude, you're gonna be that close to a girl, whatever it is, like whatever works for you and your significant other, sure, go about it. If you have to work with same sex or for religious purposes or what is like something someone's comfortable with, sure. But go and check it out,
Yeah.
right? Because we see videos, and I get it. We're seeing people turn each other into pretzels. We're seeing people looking like they're cuddling. We just start to go like, oh, like there might still be that factor of like, I'm not getting that close to a dude, like,
Yeah.
But if you can get over that and you show up, and this is why it's so part of my mission, expand your comfort zone. If you're uncomfortable, why? Are you afraid you're going to make a fool of yourself? Good. Then go. Because right now you're too comfy.
Yeah.
Like if you're afraid to try this, you're too comfortable. Like I'll tell you, man, this is kind of off topic, but I love doing new shit, man. Cause like even like my girlfriend and I, like I love if we get the chance to like do a new date, something we haven't done, man. Like as much as I'm like, oh, like I wonder what we're gonna do, how it's gonna go, like based off an activity. It's great. It's like I'm doing it with someone I love,
Yeah.
right? And it's new, it's exciting. We get to see different sides of each other when we do this new activity. So same thing, man, for yourself is if people and I know it's a little bit of an adjustment, but when they do it, man, like I don't even care if people stick with it. To be honest, I tell my students, I'm like, if you don't want to continue this, that's up to you. But at least like at least put a year in, put 6 months to a year. And then I personally, I'll be honest, when someone puts a year in, they're hooked.
Oh
Like
yeah.
busy, I've seen people go off and on, they always come back,
Well,
right? Because
there's the blue belt phenomenon, right? People work real hard and they become that blue belt. They're like, I did it. I got an upgrade. And then they stop showing up. Like,
yeah, we're done, right? So, oh man, you got to keep going, right?
yeah. So I think this is sort of tying up nicely, like for our listeners, for them to get a sense of what you've come from and to know that, like, I really believe in story personally. And I think that we don't know how to deal with anything, how to go about our life unless we have example, unless we have story. You know, it's kind of like listening to your story about some of what you've been through, I think is helpful for others because they can use that to map their own life in a way. Like if I was in that situation, would I want to react the same way? You know, how would it's just important for people to know that they can be the hero of their own story. They have to see heroes. They have to know that it's out there. And so I'm super honored that you came on to talk because I think that you're doing really great inspirational things. I think that everybody should follow you on Instagram and all that. And also, if they're in the Edmonton area in particular, they ought to check out your gym. So I want to give just the last little bit here to you. If you could just pitch your social media, where people ought to go, and also a little bit about your gym and what you offer there for people who might be interested to try out a class or something.
Yeah, of course. Then thank you so much, man, for saying that. I really appreciate it. With our gym, we like to create like a multifaceted approach, Spencer. So like what we do is we have something for everybody, for the family, for significant individual, where we offer strength and conditioning. And we really are on the premise of you got to move holistically. You got to make sure you're mobile. So let's stretch, let's strengthen your joints as well as your tendons and your muscles. And then you got to be able to do your endurance. So they get stronger, get faster, and get pain-free. Those are the three pillars of our strength and conditioning program. We do this in a team setting where you can work out with others, and we do this on a one-on-one personal training basis as well. Mm-hmm. Now that has taken my passion for training people in the realm of just moving better with martial arts, of course, right? We talked about it this whole podcast, being able to offer Muay Thai, boxing, jiujitsu, MMA, like having something for everyone, and we have students of ours that do everything. We have students that are like, hey, I'm just here for jiu-jitsu. And then we have families that, they drop off their kids, the kids wait while the parents go. And eventually we're going to have some parent and kid classes together. So we're excited, man. We want to make parents' lives easier. You know this better than me. Pick up and drop off, pain in the ass, right?
Yeah.
Great. But why not after 5 p.m. be able to have a place that can be the second home, which is Bravé MMA and fitness, and have your kids hang out, have yourself get your workout in, do it together, and be able to do it in a safe and inclusive space, So I welcome anyone listening, to check us out, come try a complimentary session. You can reach out and connect with me personally on Instagram. I'm at Kenny Bhullar, BJJ. And then I'm also on it's pronounced Bravé, but it's spelled at bravemma.fitness.
Yeah, wonderful. And I know that next time I'm in Edmonton and have a bit of time, 100%, I'd love to drop in to a class and hang out and learn a few things.
I'm by that. And even like whatever works for you, man. Come on by, do all the classes, do jiu-jitsu, we'll get some rolls in. We'd love that.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit after the podcast because I am working on a project that involves training an actress to learn how to fight a little bit. So I'm going to talk to you about that. But for everyone else, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I'm going to try to be back a little bit more regularly with these episodes. I'm going to try to be a little bit punchier to the hour mark like I've done so well today and have wonderful guests like Kenny on and just keep being fuel for creative people. So thanks again, everybody. Take care. This podcast is produced by my film company, Red Reach Productions. We specialize in business promotion, documentaries, and cinematic storytelling. Based in Edson, but serving the whole of Alberta, Canada, and beyond. Check out our client testimonials and reach out to discuss the film project that you have in mind at redreachproductions.com. Thank you again for listening to Creative Insanity.